blindfolded Palestinian.
Made international headlines.
16-year-old Palestinian.
A veteran of the Israeli prison system.
You've probably seen these two Palestinian teenagers all over the news. But what about these? Last year, 1,467 Palestinian minors were arrested. And children's rights organizations say between 500 and 700 Palestinian kids are prosecuted in Israeli military courts every year. So how does child detention in the occupied West Bank work? Well, it starts with the arrests. The occupied West Bank, except for East Jerusalem, is under Israeli military law. That means that Palestinians as young as 12 years old can be arrested if they're suspected of punishable acts. The most common one is stone throwing. It carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. Now, a lot of these arrests happen in night raids. Several human and children's rights organizations have reported handcuffs, blindfolds, and physical and verbal abuse of kids during their arrests.
He's gonna go with me and he's gonna be tied up all night and he's gonna get punished and you're gonna need to pay to take him back.
It's a method to terrorize the youth and to make sure that that sort of system of control is asserted on people at a young age. Because for most of the children that they arrest, they're not planning on pressing charges or they're not planning on taking it any further than that initial sort of detainment period.
And once a child is arrested, they're taken to interrogation. According to Israeli military orders, kids have some rights during arrest. Their parents must know where they're being taken, the child has the right to a lawyer, and the interrogation must be filmed. But that's not always the case. Most parents don't know why their child is being taken or where they're going. Lots of kids don't see a lawyer until they're taken to court. For 16 and 17-year-olds like Ahid and Fawzi, that can take up to 4 days. And interviews are rarely recorded. If they are, they're almost impossible to get access to. The physical conditions are just as tough. During interrogation, many kids have their hands and feet tied and aren't allowed to have food, water, or go to the toilet. Physical and verbal abuse, sleep deprivation, humiliation, threats of sexual assault, and threats against the child's family have also been reported. And in between long interrogations, which can span hours at a time, kids are kept in detention centers. And in detention, some are kept in solitary confinement. According to DCIP, 19% of the kids they interviewed in 2017 were kept in isolation for an average of 12 days. Many kids end up signing confessions in Hebrew, a language they don't understand, and it's often admissible in court. Palestinian children and teenagers in the West Bank are tried in military juvenile courts. They were set up in response to worldwide criticisms of Israel's treatment of minors back in 2009. The courts have certain requirements, like specially trained judges and closed-door hearings, but conviction is still the goal.
The juvenile court provides no extra measure of justice and provides no extra concern for the child. It doesn't provide social workers, it doesn't look to rehabilitation as most juvenile courts should. It simply is a different court.
In court, the prosecution can have coerced signed confessions or testimonies from soldiers as proof, and the prosecution, as well as the judge, are all under the Israeli army. So the overwhelming majority of cases end in plea bargains, where children plead guilty in exchange for a lower sentence. The last time the courts released their conviction rate, it was 99.74%.
The notion of justice is missing, and that's because of the simple fact that the body is responsible for the arrest is related to the body that's responsible for interrogation with the children and eventually with the body that asked for the convictions. All of these faces are different faces for the same coin.
And once a plea bargain is taken, the kids are sentenced. Under Israeli military law, 16 and 17-year-olds like Ahid are considered adults, so they're sentenced like adults too. Ahid could be facing up to 10 years in jail. As for the prisons themselves, 2 out of the 3 prisons where Palestinian children serve time are in Israeli territory, which is a violation of the 4th Geneva Convention. Keeping kids outside the occupied West Bank means that family visits are difficult and rare. Family members have to first apply for entry permits to Israel, which can take months to process, if they're even approved. And the kids aren't just without family contact. their studies are being disrupted too. Educational facilities in the prisons are lacking, with limited access to real teachers and only 2 classes offered. Local NGOs report a drop in minor school performance once kids are released. Some kids even drop out. But a weak curriculum isn't the only reason.
When those kids are released, they feel somehow alienated into their own society. They are watchful and detached from reality.
A 2012 report shows that almost half of the kids interviewed were mentally withdrawn and were performing worse in school after their arrest. 80% suffered from insomnia, and 90% developed anxiety.
There's the sort of trauma of going through the system, of the stripping of the child of their sort of innate humanity by being processed through. And we don't necessarily think of that, but that's damaging for anyone, especially a child where you're not even really all that formed yet. Children are suddenly not children anymore.